following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome everybody to Us Democrats, the weekly show here on Access Nashua, produced and put on by the Nashua Democratic City Committee. My name is Dave Tencza, chair of the Nashua Democratic City Committee. With me is my co-host, Ken Gidge, Representative Ken Gidge. Representative, welcome.
Welcome, Representative. I forget that.
Yes, well, you've earned it after your 6 years in the legislature.
Yes, I'm going to be 6 and probably going for 8. That's if my psychiatrist make sure I'm still on my medications.
Sure.
You know what? There's an old saying that a representative from Keene who taught at Keene State political science did one term, which is 2 years as a state representative, and he said, in my class of political science, anyone who makes it through 2 years has like a master's in political science.
Well, it's great education in government and the way things really work, as you would agree. I spent 5 years working as a legislative aide down in Massachusetts, and that is
Who for?
Representative John Quinn from
Do you remember
Dartmouth.
how much money they made?
In Massachusetts?
Yeah.
I think they made, the base salary is about $55,000, $56,000 a year, but they all had second jobs down there too. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them did. But I think that base salary allowed them to, if they wanted to, do that full time for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
And there were only 160 representatives and 40 senators, so it was a different ball game somewhat.
But how, as a legislative aide, how many aides did they have? One?
Oh, we had Representative Quinn had myself and at least one other staff person as long as I was there, and then when he was chairman of the committee, he had a full staff of 3 or 4 people. One that just worked on the bills that were in the committee, and then his personal staff and secretarial staff and everyone else. So it was a full complement. We can get a lot done, get into some issues that he was interested in.
Well, here in the state of New Hampshire, I'm in Commerce, which is banking and insurance, and you can imagine what we're going through.
Oh, that's
And I put this in my ad, you need somebody up there in banking and insurance, especially with what's taking place, because we do medical, and so it's quite interesting. But the chair of the committee, this is factual. We have a room, it's 302 in the legislative office building. And in the back, there's one main office, and in the back, there is one desk, all right, that 2 people sit at, the chair and the vice chair, one telephone, and I would say probably 80% of the time they have nobody to do anything.
No staff?
No, there's no staff at all. No.
Aren't there researchers?
Well,
for the committees?
Yes, I shouldn't say that, but the researcher does not just do researcher does 2, 3 committees.
Oh wow!
Pam's smiling, so you can imagine how crazy she is.
Sure. How many committees? How many standing committees are there in the House?
Oh God, that's a great question. 9? I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not sure. Still, because there's so many subcommittees, and I mean, there's a committee, but if you have a committee and it only meets 5 times a year, is that considered a committee? Yes, it is. But so I really don't know. But I know that in Commerce we are banking and insurance probably should be separate.
Sure.
But we're also consumer affairs.
Okay, so you deal with all the bills that come through about
consumer affairs.
Wow.
So it's probably one of the most interesting places to be.
Sure. And when you say insurance, does that cover everything from car insurance to health insurance to homeowners, or is it separated?
Obamacare. Would you like to start with that? So we had with the Tea Party come in, okay, and the whole thing was that we do not want government running our state of New Hampshire.
Sure.
So somebody brought in a bill to start an insurance exchange. And the Tea Party came in and they said, with one senator, said, no, we don't want that. We do not want an exchange. But we don't want the government running it.
Sure.
So I said, well, which one do you want? Do you want an exchange, or you don't want the government running the exchange? And when it was put in that pot, either we run it, the state of New Hampshire runs it, or the government runs it.
Right.
So half of them got up and left. When they finally realized that they were there for kind of an awkward reason. They wanted everything.
Sure. And let's be clear about it. When you say you don't want the federal government running it,
The federal government.
rather than the state of New Hampshire government. I mean, it's going to be one or the other under the federal law.
Well, then the House of Representatives, then Bill O'Brien, who sits here, will be sitting here tomorrow with me. He was the Speaker of the House, and he pushed through a law making it illegal for the state of New Hampshire to have an insurance exchange. So, hospital got together, Anthem. They put together kind of their own exchange. The federal government agreed that that was okay. So an insurance company puts an exchange through. And here in the state of Nashua, or city of Nashua, we only have one hospital in the exchange.
Sure.
If we had, in the insurance exchange, if we had a state exchange, don't you think that Nashua would have had both hospitals? Of course we would.
Well, I mean, I think it's, and I don't have any bias towards Anthem or Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever entity is going to run the exchange, but clearly as a business, they're going to be looking out for their best interests, and not the best interests of the people of the state of New Hampshire, the people who are going to sign up through this exchange.
And who would know that more than myself?
Right.
I'm on those committees. I argue with these people. But they were very intelligent. They just said, fine, if you lawmakers, and I'm one of them, do not want to take the responsibility, then us, the insurance companies, of which we're arguing with most of the time, will set up the exchange. So I'm going, what? What's... If we set it up, Nashua would have two hospitals because Nashua is the second largest city. So a lot of women who have women problems and need certain procedures can't have it in Nashua. So they've got to go to Manchester. And so what happens is that everyone's trying to save money, right?
Everyone's trying to save money.
What happens?
And the whole point of the insurance exchange is for people to save money on health insurance, isn't it?
Yes,
Partially.
it is.
But if they're running to Manchester or Portsmouth or Concord or some other place because the hospitals aren't covered, one, it's going to be a pain for them, and then two, it's going to cost them more and more time off of work, more cost for gas and tolls and everything else. So.
Oh, and not only that is that the hospital that has the exchange from the insurance company is St. Joe's.
Right. Which is a great hospital.
Oh, it's a wonderful hospital. Matter of fact, I'll be working with a nurse. She called me just before I left on a bill that the nurses have, and it's starting at St. Joe's.
Sure.
It's violent against nurses, which it happens, but I didn't know. She's writing a paper, PowerPoint, and she's asked me to help her. And I said, sure, and not only sure, but St. Joe's is in Ward 6.
Sure.
So I'm obligated.
Sure. Oh, that's interesting. Violence against nurses.
Yeah.
People who come to the emergency room or are in the hospital and just have
or drunk. She's got beaten up. Some of them have been put in the hospital.
Yeah.
Hit, punched, yelled and screamed at. And it's interesting that the security guards are usually retired people. And when this big fight took place, they wouldn't let the security guard in because he was 80 years old. And they didn't want him to get hurt. And so hospitals must protect the people who work there.
Sure.
So she's trying to do something with other nurses, and there's a bill coming up, and they're going to do a PowerPoint. So that's fascinating.
Sure.
And so anyway, we only have one hospital, and we should have two hospitals because of the size of Nashua. Oh,
we should. I mean, we're the second largest city in the state. We have two fantastic hospitals in Nashua, and I would imagine they're great regional hospitals. People, not just from Nashua, but all of
Southern Hillsborough County
come here.
Come from Massachusetts.
Yeah, come from Massachusetts.
Lowell. Not only that, is if you think for a moment, Obama made it really clear that you may have your own doctor. Well, if you put up an exchange, the Republicans the elected Republicans pass a bill stating that it is illegal to have an exchange. Then the insurance company starts the exchange and they eliminate one hospital, and your doctor happens to be at this particular hospital, then what the elected Republicans have done has made sure that Obamacare is looking bad because they're not letting or making it legal that we can start an exchange so both hospitals can be in.
Sure. Well, would you agree with me that the original intent behind the law was to try to stop any type of the exchange under the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare from actually starting here in New Hampshire? I mean, that's what their intent was initially.
Yes.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's clear, and I think we've seen everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks in Washington. It's just another attempt by elected Republicans to stop this program, which could potentially benefit millions of Americans without health insurance, which is a good idea.
Yes, and do you know what day they closed the government down? On the very day Obamacare started.
Right. It's interesting how they set that up for the...
Well, they said, Bill O'Brien, who I've talked to, he says, well, that's just how it worked out. And I like Bill. It's a good debate that we have back and forth. But I said, that's not a coincidence. I don't care how you put it.
I'll tell you I don't think it's another coincidence that was a fundraising deadline for congressional, congressmen. There was a fundraising deadline the same day, because I'm sure that people like Ted Cruz, a senator from Texas, a lot of Tea Party elected Republicans raised a lot of money over the idea of defunding the government and ending Obamacare and this and that.
Right.
I don't believe those people. The people in Washington are so sophisticated about those kinds of things.
Well, they are and they're not. The elected Republicans closed the government, and the following day, World War II veterans wanted to go to their memorial, the Veterans Memorial. And it was closed like everyone else, because you've got to maintain these and all that. So they had guards there to make sure that nobody would go in and get hurt, because usually memorials have people surrounding the area, walking around and protecting it. And all of a sudden, the World War II vets go there and they said, you don't understand. We fought World War II. If you don't think we can move those fences, we are.
Sure.
And the guards down there said, you're right. So they took it upon themselves, the people who worked there, opened it up and let the World War II vets in. But didn't the elected Republicans figure that out already?
Well, they clearly didn't think through the exactly what a government shutdown meant. Even more, I don't want to say inconsequential, but there are a lot of important things that the government, important functions like national security, that are going to be affected by the shutdown. Things like, even here in the state of New Hampshire, U.S. Attorney's Office, the prosecutors up there are not going to be looking at all the fraud cases that are going on. They're going to be cut back eventually with all the criminal prosecutions of these serious criminal offenders that they're dealing with. They clearly weren't focused on that. They were more focused on this idea of ending Obamacare, ending this government program, which is going to have a really positive effect for millions of people.
Some may not know what you do for work, so why don't you, for the new listeners, why don't you tell the listeners what you do for work?
Oh, sure. I'm a prosecutor, but I'm a prosecutor here employed by Hillsborough County in New Hampshire. But there's been news stories, and we deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office on a fairly regular basis.
So you would know this.
Oh, I would know this, and I would know that, it's, I mean, eventually I would assume that the court system would have to shut down if that's not funded. And the people that the U.S. Attorney's Office is dealing with are really, not the kind of people we want to let slip through the cracks. So it's a serious problem.
And it's going to get worse.
Oh, it's only going to get worse as long as it drags on, and we have the.
Well, why don't we talk about the $100,000 death benefit for a soldier being killed to his family? That's shameful. But why didn't the elected Republicans know this?
Right.
Instead, what they do is, oh no, let's pass a bill quickly. Let's pass a bill. Let's do this. Let's do it. Wait a minute. So now you're blaming it on the elected Democrats. Mm-hmm. That, gee, they should have done that.
Right.
And us Democrats are going, excuse me, you're the ones who closed the government down. We didn't. Don't you know these things? And obviously, they don't.
Well, I find it hard to believe that leadership of the Republican Party down in Washington doesn't know these things. I mean, they've been in Washington for a long time. Even the younger members of leadership know how serious this issue is. I think, Washington is totally separate than anything that's going on anywhere else in the country, I would say. But, my perspective is they just don't care. They have their ideology, they're sticking to it, and
every time something comes up, and shame on the elected Republicans for not knowing it, mm-hmm. and then jumping on to making sure that the families of those who were lost and more get their death benefits. Shame on them for jumping in. Now let's pass a bill to fund this, right. But let's blame the Democrats. Right. Excuse me, right. You're the one who shut the government down.
Well, even worse, what about Representative Bachmann, who has been a Tea Party favorite, Tea Party darling for the last couple of years, showing up at the World War II memorial to greet those veterans, and try to claim, or the chair of the Republican National Committee showing up with a check to say, well, we'll pay for this, for the security at this location. I think it's too little, too late. People around the country are really starting to recognize that who's at fault for this shutdown. I don't think there's ever been a doubt about that.
Yeah, and starting us Democrats, and that's here in the city of Nashville, and hopefully we'll get around to other cities also, is one of the reasons why you turn on a lot of these newscasts, even newscasts who have more Democrats than Republicans. They're kind of soft. They're not pointing the finger and saying, well, this is an elected Republican, and this is what the elected Republican is doing.
Sure.
Now,
and let me just note, even some non-elected Republicans, we have a Republican from Nashville who's declared that he's running for Congress against Danny Custer next year.
Yes.
Before the shutdown, he came out and said the shutdown would be a good thing. I haven't heard since that. A good thing. That he'd be in favor of
his name was Lambert, I believe?
Gary Lambert.
Gary he was senator up for one term.
Yes.
And now he's running against Annie Custer. I can tell you right now, I have been on the same stage with this man. He's a very, very nice, hard-working man. But to make the comment that he made that the shutdown is okay, well, consider it as an elected official. Do you want them, or people running for office, do you want people to say it's okay to shut the government down? And what do they want to do? They wanted to debate, and they wanted to work against what? Obamacare.
Right.
So we're not elected Democrats, or Democrats are not negotiating. It's a law. Change the law if you don't like it.
Right. I think some Republicans even come out now and said, if you want to change the law, what you need to do is elect a Republican president, elect a Republican Senate, and elect a Republican House, which the rate that Republicans are at is not.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think
don't
the
think that's gonna happen.
Republicans at this particular point, those who are running for the office and those who are holding a Republican office are going to start, you know, they've got to the point right now where it's shameful, and the debt ceiling now, and that's probably more catastrophic than anything.
I mean, I don't think that there's any you know, even Democrats who think that the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare is perfect. I think,
No.
you know, we're all we know that it's going to have to be tweaked and
Exactly.
in the future. And they certainly started talking about certain changes that can be made.
Absolutely.
But you know, to shut down the government and believe that this is going to be funded full scale is just not a smart political move, as we're seeing right now with how elected Republicans are reacting to the shutdown, which is in probably day 10 or 11 at this point.
Which is, by the way, that's $1 billion a day, and that's not counting the morale.
Sure.
Businesses are not hiring.
Sure.
They're not. People are not buying as much. Less cars are being sold. I mean, though these people have their jobs, part of what we do is we need a leader who has strong morale. And when you have a party, an opposition party, doing what these people are doing, this hurts the entire country and the world that's looking at us.
It does, and you know, we have the debt ceiling debate coming up, or we're somewhat in the middle of the debt ceiling debate right now because, you know, that's the next October 17th is the next date that everyone's looking towards. It's when the U.S. needs to either increase the debt ceiling or possibly face default on all their obligations, financial obligations, which, you know, economists from all over the world, important people have said this could be catastrophic if the U.S. says, well, we just are not going to raise the debt ceiling. We're not going to continue to pay on our debts that we owe to foreign investors, even domestic investors.
And I'm glad you said investor, because I've spent a little today going over the debt ceiling, which a lot of people may not know about, and I think it's really important. Do we spend more money than we take in?
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
No?
We spend 75% of what we take in. There's several trillion that we have. So do we spend more than we take in? The answer is no. So that's a myth.
Okay.
Myth one. So we do not spend more than what we make. And there may be arguments to that, but okay.
So explain then what the debt ceiling debate is all about then.
What causes us to expand constantly, let's say, spend more money? What? Well, a great deal of the debt ceiling is what the government owes itself. I know this sounds really bizarre, but there's probably 20% of the debt ceiling that the government owns itself, but they throw this in so it looks like it is a lot more. Why this is done, I'm not sure. Treasury bills. We sell a lot of treasury bills.
Sure.
The person who holds the most treasury bills is China. Why do we, and then you said investment, why do people come to the United States and buy treasury bills?
Because they're a great safe investment.
In fact, treasury bills had paid as little as nothing. Because the people who are investing in anything could lose, but if you buy a United States Treasury bill, you never lose. It's never, ever in the history of this country has ever not paid the interest on it. So let's say we're given $10 billion. Well, we have $10 billion to do what we wish to, and we pay interest on the bill, just the interest. We're not paying it back. So if China said, and by the way, there's a lot of other countries that invest into the United States, and the word is invest. If China, for instance, said, okay, in the next year, we're going to sell $500 billion worth of Treasury notes. That would send the United States and the world into one of the great collapses. The fear of us not paying our bill right now, the world is watching. The last time we got close, Standard & Poor's brought our credit rating down. The United States of America credit rating down because of the Republican elected officials who would not raise the debt ceiling.
Sure.
So what happens is, throughout the world, we're not trusted economically.
And so that, I mean, that has an impact not just here, but certainly in a lot of developing nations.
Oh.
People who look to the United States.
Oh, trust us.
Right.
And we help these countries, and when we can't help them, other countries do, and we sort of, you know, lose.
Sure. And once our bond rating is lowered, we pay, the United States pays more for, so it's like if you default on your credit card, they up your interest rate, essentially is what it is.
Yes.
Something like that.
Well,
That's just a basic
it's something like that, and that is because that the elected Republicans last time brought us right up to the brink, and Standard & Poor's decided, first time in our history, that this has taken place.
Sure.
Now we're getting to another point. So let's look at the debt ceiling. What causes the debt ceiling the most? Recessions, believe it or not, because we still have to, we don't have the taxes coming in.
Sure.
We don't have people working. People need subsistence, etc.
Sure.
So number one is recessions. Number two is wars. These are the two main things. Basically, if you don't have a recession and you don't have a war, there's no problem not only paying bills and paying it down.
Sure.
So when you have a recession like what we went through, and then you have a Republican Party yelling and screaming how much money we spend, they're lying.
Sure.
They're not telling you the truth.
And let's just be clear. I mean, at some points in our history, the deficit spending has helped the United States.
Oh, absolutely.
Like during World War II. I mean, in the 30s and 40s, it got people back to work. Certainly during World War II, it
That's
helped
what
us
it's about.
Produce it helped us produce jobs.
A deficit is okay in circumstances. Right. So it's interesting that we're in a recession, or we're coming out of a recession. More money is coming in to, let's use New Hampshire as an example. More money is coming into the state of New Hampshire. We'll use New Hampshire as the country.
Actually, we got great news this week with the state budget.
What? How much extra money?
About $79 million.
$79 million extra dollars. Why? Because our state is getting stronger. More people are coming, more tourism up here. People are buying properties, buying new cars. That's great.
Right.
So now, our sort of call it, we never have a deficit because we have to balance our budget up here.
Sure.
But now we have $79 million extra dollars. And now we don't have to sort of raise our debt ceiling. We'll use that as an example. And the same thing is taking place with the United States. Now, are we, is this country spending, is the debt ceiling going up? Yes, it is going up. And I know it sounds rather bizarre. It's going up slower. And it's going to stop, and it's going to start receding as soon as our economy gets better and as soon as we stop fighting wars. Now, what's making our economy bad now?
Well,
The shutdown of the government?
Shutdown of the government certainly is a big part. You said $1 billion. I've heard it's $800 million a day or a week, or it's basically a lot of middle-class families who aren't receiving paychecks and aren't able to go out and pay things like the food bill and mortgage and things like that really drive the economy. I mean, I'm sure you've seen these bumper stickers that say "Moms drive the economy."
Yes.
I mean, if you did a survey, I would think that 95% of spending in a lot of households is done just on basic necessities.
Yes.
So
Basic necessities.
and so, you know, these families who aren't receiving paychecks now because Republicans decide they want to play these political games down in Washington, it affects 800,000 people throughout the country. It's not just in one, not just in one place.
And it's interesting because when social programs can't be paid for, then those people who truly need it, honestly, in some cases, some people do die because social programs, not directly, but because you can't get this to reach this person.
Sure.
So I mean, so we're not saying go kill people, or we're not saying that at all.
No.
All right. But when the economy is starting to grow, the elected Republican Party decides to close the government down. So our economy slows, just automatically slows.
Sure.
Now they're fighting about the debt ceiling, all right, which every economist, president, vice president, anyone who knows anything about the economy knows that you just don't do that.
Right. And we never have in the past. This is a new tactic that's being used to, as we've seen this last week, and try to extract concessions somehow on something. It hasn't been clear exactly what. It was clear in the beginning. It was a shutdown, Obamacare. Now that we're into this government shutdown, it's not clear exactly what Republicans are looking for in order to vote to pass a clean continuing resolution to fund the government. So
I can't, as a state representative, if I have more knowledge than most people, it's because I'm in it and doing it.
Sure.
There are people out there who understand what I'm saying and probably could say it a lot better than I have, articulate it a lot better. But when you talk about the debt ceiling, you realize that it's the economy and wars that raise. And when you say debt, it's interesting, but whatever we owe China, China has given to us.
Right.
You know, so it's sort of like, guess what? It's a treasury bond.
Sure.
So, and the more this happens, the more countries see how important it is. If you make very little money over here in the United States, at least you're not losing it.
Right.
And when you take a look at the world, some other countries can turn around and say, well, guess what? Our rating is as good, and we give you our word you'll never lose the money, but that doesn't mean you're ever going to get an interest. And that would take a lot of business away from us.
Sure. Sure. And wouldn't allow us to spend any or borrow as much money. But I think one of the interesting points on the debt ceiling, too, is that this is not new, all of a sudden new funding that Congress has come up with. I mean, this is funding and bills and programs that Congress has already voted to pass and to put into place.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like when they passed these laws, they didn't know that later on, well, it could mean that we could have to borrow some money later on to pay for it. So,
you know, and I've tried to explain it this way before. You got two people in a family who are working. Husband, wife, one child going to college, one child in college.
Sure.
The husband or wife works and needs a better car, they buy a new car, and they have a mortgage.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, now that's their life. That's
right.
where they are. They have their paycheck. All of a sudden, one, let's say, loses their job. Well, the new car still has to be paid for.
Right.
The mortgage still has to be paid for. These are bills of a necessity. The gas obviously has to be paid for. The lights have to be paid for. These are known entities. These are things that have to be paid for. Well, the kid doesn't have to go to college, and you don't have to start planning for the other college, and you certainly don't, you know, don't need new clothes for everybody, and you certainly don't need another new car, and all of a sudden the father loses the job. So the mother and father are both out of work. Well, they still have the lights. They still have the food. They still have the children. They'll get rid of their car if they can. And all of a sudden, now we start going into the point of thinking of, well, we have a house and we have equity in the house, but the economy is bad and we can't get the money out of it. And all of a sudden, you have a family that's in turmoil, and then people across the street go, you see, they were spending more money than they had. And that's basically what has happened, is when the Great Recession took place, we had these bills to pay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids didn't go to college.
Yeah.
And a lot of cars weren't bought.
Yeah.
And
That's
as the economy gets better,
yeah. Yeah, that's a great, I mean, that's a great analogy, that we weren't necessarily overspending, because clearly when we, you know, around the turn of the century, we weren't running deficits for the first time in 40 or 50 years as a country. And then things changed. So that's a very good analogy, good way of thinking. All the
well,
everything that's going
I have
on
to
now.
think, because I do talk with Bill O'Brien, who's 10 times smarter than me, but he so yes, but that's the way I look at it. And so no party can turn around and say, the Republicans turn around and say, well, you spend too much. Well, that's just not true. If you make the money, you don't have the problem. We lost the money because of the wars. Well, what administration was in the midst of, we'll use Iraq as an example. What administration was in the particular problem when the economy got bad?
Sure.
But can you?
Well, I mean, I'll just bring up, you know, it wasn't just the wars, because everyone can think everyone's entitled to their opinion of whether we should have gone to war there. But programs like the Medicare program that expanded drug coverage to seniors.
Yes.
It was a great program.
Great program.
But it had
non-funded.
Non-funded. I mean, it had a cost to it.
Yes.
So it wasn't just that these wars. I mean, there were other social programs.
It was done under a Republican, George W. Bush, a non-funded program that he made cities and states do. And so we had to pick that up. Do I think that he did wrong? No, I don't. I really don't. I think
and that was a bipartisan effort. Let's be
Yes.
clear. I mean, I think Democrats were very much in favor of that, and should be.
Yes.
Because prescription costs can be so great for people who are on a fixed income as they retire. But still, it had a cost to it.
And if I was a one-sided politician that could not look in both ways, I could make a real argument that was awful in his part. But 9/11 took place during his part, and then what did he have to found?
Right.
The great police force that we possess right now. You know, Homeland Security. I mean, come on. Yeah, that would hurt the economy. Going to Iraq was probably one of the greatest errors that any president has ever done. He could have been a great president, maybe. I don't think so, but
Well, that might be a topic for another day on the show. Maybe you and
no, never.
You and Bill O'Brien can talk about that. That would be a heated discussion. But there is one other thing that I wanted to talk about, because there was another big news this week in related to Obamacare. There's a panel that decided that approved of Medicaid expansion this week in New Hampshire, which is frankly a big deal after the Supreme Court decision, which said that states didn't necessarily have to go along with Medicaid expansion.
Correct.
Which was a big piece of the Affordable Care Act. Can you just tell us a little bit about what Medicaid expansion means, separate from this insurance marketplace that's been put in place starting October 1st?
Well, everybody knows what Medicare is. When you reach 65, you've paid into it. You get Medicare, which is an insurance policy. Medicaid is for people who are below the poverty line, really below the poverty line. Maybe several children, maybe there's an illness in the family. So Medicaid picks that up, or most of it.
Sure.
Picks up most of it. In this case, up here in the United States, well, we'll use New Hampshire. If we accepted the Medicaid, we would be able to help 58,000 people here in the state of New Hampshire, which is paid for, by the way, for, I believe, 3 to 4 years, 100%. Then we have to pay 10%. So that's pretty good for the people who are really ill, and it's good for the states.
Sure.
Because it helps us get going, and the state grows, et cetera. So the Republicans decided here in the state of New Hampshire, the elected Republicans decided that they didn't want it. So the majority of the people want it. The Republicans don't want it, so they put it in a committee.
Sure. And so, as I understand it, the Medicaid expansion would help not just the people who are very poor, but it would extend Medicaid to working families who make minimum wage.
Who are below the poverty line, yes.
Below the poverty line.
Yes.
Maybe have, well, I suppose that their children would probably, people up to 18, if you come from a low-income family, you could possibly qualify for Medicaid anyways under the Healthy Kids program.
And the great argument has been that, well, guess what? Something like 32,000 people who already have insurance would give the insurance up and then get on to Medicaid. Well, what people really don't realize, up here in New Hampshire, we're the cheapest state you're ever going to want to come around to, and to get onto Medicaid is not easy.
No.
And many times social workers have to go out and find these people who are so poor. Sure. And say, look, you are eligible. I mean, you're starving. But for somebody who has money and, to go in there and just for the sake of getting in full insurance, can't do it up here in New Hampshire. And I wish people would understand that, because I think everybody talks in a national way. Let's talk in a New Hampshire way.
Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. The federal government's going to pay 100% of
100%.
all these people who are going to come onto Medicaid for the next 3 years.
58,000, and 60% of them are women.
Okay.
And the elected Republicans are having a problem keeping women in their party.
Sure. And then after 3 years,
We pay 10%.
We pay 10%, the federal government pays 90%.
Correct.
Whereas the traditional Medicaid program right now, federal government pays 50%.
Correct.
State of New Hampshire pays 50%
Correct.
of their cost.
I don't have the exact numbers, but yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
And so the Republican argument, at least here in New Hampshire, and you know much better than I do, is that, well, you can't trust the federal government to pay 90% in 3 years, right? They think they're going to try to push it off. So it's this argument that, well, maybe down the line the federal government's not going to be able to afford it, and it's going to cost the state of New Hampshire more. So it's not actually anything that's definite or set in stone.
You know,
it's a speculation.
What I do a lot up in Concord when I hear an argument like that from somebody, I ask them, well, aren't you in the government? You're talking as if you're not in the government. Can't you be trusted to do this? Oh, well, I can be trusted, but the government can't be. Excuse me. The government is not one big thing.
Sure.
The government is many parts of it. So you don't trust your Republican Party to make sure that it is funded? Or is it Obama you don't trust? Right. So one person stops everything, or everybody stops this from taking place because of what reason? They don't trust the government? You're an elected official. I say this probably once a week. You're the elected official. You don't like it, change it. If you like it, keep it.
Yeah, right.
I keep saying this to elected officials up in Concord who start talking about the state government and, you know, how bad it is, et cetera. I said, you are the government.
Right, right. I mean, in people who are trying to paycheck teachers, police officers, I mean, that, you know, people like me, prosecutors.
Well, you're kind of on the front line of a lot of things. You
Sometimes,
see, you see, or if that's not your area, but you see the worst of the worst that can take place. And you know, there are a lot of bad people, no question. Sure. But there are some people who get caught up in circumstances also.
Oh, absolutely.
And poverty, and mental illness, and there's a judge, excuse me, I believe he runs the jail system in some state, and he's coming out. I guess probably he has a book coming out and saying, in the 1930s, I used to show people warehoused mentally ill people. He says, if you think that's bad, you ought to come to our jails, where something like 58% of them have mental illness. So what are we doing? We are putting people in a cage with an impossibility of everyone getting any type of help. So there's a lot of things taking place. But you're a prosecutor. You probably have heard about mental illness anyway.
Sure, and obviously we deal with it and deal with it on a daily, weekly basis at the Superior Court. They deal with it a lot more in the district courts, where they see people who just, it's the same population that comes through the system, and it really has been. I've been a prosecutor now for 6 years, and so I started right before the Great Recession, and it really has been interesting to see how the services have dropped off for people with mental illnesses, drug rehab programs, things like that.
Oh, I was up there when the Hillsborough County Commission, I was one of the commissioners up, not a commissioner, but I was one of the individuals who sat in and did the money for the Hillsborough County, and getting rid of the drug program, where you have a judge come in and your police come in and say, look, you don't understand. We have a program whereby instead of putting people in jail, we give them another chance. It's strict. Some kids can't, or grown-ups can't go through it.
Sure.
But if you don't do this, they don't get a chance. B, they're going into a system where we can't educate them, and they can't educate themselves, and they can't make a living, so we're putting them back out in society.
Sure.
So I'm going yelling and screaming, what are you doing? Then the thing that was my big thing was we have 5.5 social workers here in the, well, we have more social workers than 5.5 in Hillsborough County, but Hillsborough County social workers, the county social workers, we had, I think it was 4.5, which was $450,000 a year, and it was 5.5 social workers. And they came along and they got rid of the social workers completely.
Really? Yeah.
So before they did that, the social workers came to us and said, you don't understand. It's less than $500,000 for 5.5 of us. But we saved the state of New Hampshire $1.5 million because we keep people out of jail.
Sure.
We keep people out of mental hospitals. We make sure that people do what they're supposed to do. If there is a dangerous moment, we get the kids out, the wives out, and in some cases getting the husbands out of these positions. We're very important. We keep people out of jail. And I stood up there, and David Campbell stood up there, and David is a Ward 6 alderman also from Ward 6. Ward 6 has got some pretty strong people. I know, at least we're not shy. I mean, David's a smart guy, but when they got rid of that, and it looked good on the books, and now Nashua has to pay for what the county was paying for, and by the way, the county has a surplus.
Right.
They get rid of the social workers, so it cost us $1.5 million.
Sure.
Where with $500,000, they did $1.5 million.
Well, it's penny wise and pound foolish, and I think the last session, there were certain regulators who were laid off. They lost their jobs. I forget which department they were in. You might have a better recollection, but you laid off auditors for the Department of Revenue, and so there's less people to go and collect taxes that are owed and to do the audits.
And the interesting part, what you say is that you're right. The fact is that when times are really hard, people are not going to pay their bills.
Right.
To have an auditor go out there and put a circle around an individual who hasn't paid the bill for a good reason, then guess what? The state can work around that without a year down the road, someone who's really in trouble.
Right.
So auditors are very, very important. Penny wise, pound foolish. Getting rid of the social workers, in my opinion, was probably, and I'll tell you, I fought and fought and fought to get them back. And if you spend $450,000 and they make you $1.5 million, I got news for you. You take a deal like that every day.
Well, it's just a good investment.
Yeah.
I mean,
so we lose $1 million instead of. So Nashua's got to pick it up directly.
And clearly, Nashua, Manchester, issues like mental health, we're affected more than the towns surrounding us. So in a Hillsborough County delegation, there are a lot more people who represent the towns than represent the cities, correct?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So I mean,
absolutely,
their concerns are different than the city's
absolutely. What we don't have, seem to have, is Manchester's very strong delegation. Nashua has to be stronger than it is. And one of the good parts of the Democratic Party here in the Nashua area is you coming in. I mean, you were there, and Harvey, took second place and put you up there. We're sitting here doing a show. So it's important that we strengthen this. But you're right. Delegations will, their constituency. I'm from Ward 6. I'm from Nashua. And I truly believe that Ward 6, what's good in Ward 6 is good for the state of New Hampshire. Absolutely. 99% of the time. I do not forget where I'm from. The problem last time, 2 years before, is the Republican elected officials voted so much against Nashua.
Yeah, like what? Can you mention an
everything. Well, the social workers is just one example.
Sure.
Name the programs. I mean, you right across the board, and it wasn't necessary. It's we want to keep a surplus. We agree on that. But they lied. When I was there, they said the surplus was only $8 million, and it turned out to be $16 million. Well, you lied to me. You gave me the wrong numbers, and guess what? It looks good on paper, but the problem is it costs Nashua, Hillsborough County, it costs Hillsborough County $1 million not to have those social workers. So it's kind of...
And even you mentioned the academy program, which is like the drug court program.
Absolutely.
I mean, that program, they paid 1 or 2 staff people.
Absolutely.
Their salaries to help work with people in the community.
Correct.
And it saved them tens of thousands of dollars rather than incarcerating them at Valley Street Jail. And the county pays for that. So,
oh my God! Yeah. There are people who don't have to go to jail. But they are in a sense having problems. Like, we'll use mental illness because I think that's the big thing right now. Let's just face it.
Sure.
A social worker or somebody helping these people can direct these people or families in the proper direction. That saves us a lot of money.
Right.
But it looks good on paper that the Republicans say, "Look at all the money we saved up here." Right. Well, it comes back. Nashua's got to pay for it.
Right. And I mean, in the end, it's not saving money. And what I see in the county attorney's office is it's not saving individuals money because these people who start to do drugs continue, especially now. It's such an awful problem with pills. It turns into other opiate addictions.
And that affects everybody around them.
Well, it affects everybody. And, the worst thing is when they start breaking into houses and affecting other people. We all pay as a community in the long run. So it really is. I'm hoping with this surplus, there'll be a lot of that money will be used to put back a lot of essential services.
To save money.
Right.
And
I think that's what the governor was talking about earlier in the session, right? She was hoping for $40 million. So now there's $80 million she'll be able to do a lot. The legislature will be able to do a lot. So.
And we probably got 4 minutes left to the program. Us Democrats is very important. We want to make it really clear, if you agree or disagree with us, you're welcome to at least get 5 minutes to sit across from us on television and
absolutely.
tell us. If you like the show, want to contribute, other Democrats want to come on.
Yes.
I don't have to be here every week. I mean, David, you're very competent. If you're not here, I can be here. So that's why there's two of us. We really don't need two, if you got to guess.
Right.
In some cases. But if we want to keep it an hour,
Yep.
Like we did last week, as we did a half hour, then I came on and we finished it up, and it was a great show.
Sure.
It's just another energy.
And I'll tell you, I mean, it'd be great to have more guests on the show, people who want to come on and talk and give their opinion. Anyone who's here in Nashua, it's important, getting both sides, getting all sides out of the debate. Anyone who wants to can contact me at my email
Telephone
address,
number.
which is dave.tencza@gmail.com. You can give me a call. You can go to NashuaDemocrats.com and send us a note or join our email list.
Oh, come join the meetings.
Yeah.
Come to the meetings.
Get more
you don't have to be come in, sit down. You may be a Republican who's looking for a change.
Yeah. Just to get to know people. I mean, I think that's
all.
I think the more you get to know Democrats here in Nashville, they're just a nice group of people who really work hard. The core group work hard to go and talk to our neighbors, just let them know why we feel that these issues are so important. It's really about strengthening the community, having a great city, which we do already, but we can always do a little bit better.
Yes, we can.
Absolutely can. I think that is all the time
That's
we
it.
have for this week. That was a quick hour that we did there. Thank you very much for joining us this week for Us Democrats. This is Dave Tencza, my co-host, Ken Gidge. Again, it's Us Democrats here on Access Nashua. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.